Wow, welcome to this talk. I guess all I have to do is put spring in the title and you will come to a Jakarta EE talk. But don't worry, it will be spring. My name is Ivar Grimstad. I'm the Jakarta EE developer advocate at Eclipse Foundation. And this talk is all about migrating from Spring Boot 2 to Spring Boot 3, so don't worry. So, these are my social media coordinates. If you want to connect with me on any social media out there, please feel free to do so during or after the talk. I'll do my best to respond. Before I go into the Spring stuff, I just want to give you a little information about what Jakarta EE is all about and then how it relates to Spring. So the latest release of Jakarta EE is Jakarta EE 10. It was released in September last year, so it's about a year old. And Jakarta EE 10, or Jakarta EE in general, is all about specifications. And when we talk about specifications, we talk about a specification document that in textual form describes some piece of technology. We have some API artifacts that are usually in Maven Central, and that's what you as developers would use when you program against these APIs. And then we have a test compatibility kit, or a TCK, that is a test suite that validates that an implementation fulfills all the requirements in the specification documents and the API. And an implementation that fulfills all these requirements is a compatible implementation. And in order to have a final specification in Jakarta EE, we need at least one open source compatible implementation. And there can be multiple implementations, but at least one of them has to be open source. But most of them are open source, but there are some closed source options as well, and that's fine, as long as there is one open source. And Jakarta EE 10 received a lot of updates. And all the blue specifications here were updated in Jakarta EE 10. So some of them are more relevant to Spring than others, so I won't go through all of these. I'll just pick a couple later. But as you see, it was a general update across the platform. There is a new specification down in the corner called CDI Lite, and that enables us to take the dynamic features of CDI and resolve them at compile time so we can build native images with Jakarta EE as well. The Jakarta EE web profile is a subset of the platform, and it's specifications that are more targeting general, usual web applications. And it has all specifications for persistence and web UIs and that kind of stuff. And if we scale it even further down, we have the new Jakarta EE core profile. And this is the first time we did a new profile in Jakarta EE since Java EE 6 when web profile was introduced. So this is the smallest subset of Jakarta EE technologies that you can have a compatible implementation of, or a compatible product. And these are targeting microservices, and with the CDI Lite specification, they can compile using GraalVM if they want to. Jakarta EE 10 is based on Java SE 11. And we compile all the APIs on 11, but we make sure that the TCK runs on both 11 and 17. So app developers, you use 17 features if you like, and the key here is that we validate the implementations on 17. So if you want to use 17, that's where you should go. And you can also, some of these runtimes are on 21 as well, but we don't have an official TCK for 21 on Jakarta EE 10. So how is this relevant to Spring then? Well, to see why it's relevant to Spring, we need to back to the previous release of Jakarta EE, which was Jakarta EE 9. And that's where we did this javax to Jakarta namespace change. And this was something we had to do because of the agreements with Oracle. And quite generally, I think it was a good thing. It's kind of gives us a clear separation from what's in the Java platform and what's in Jakarta. So it's easier to in the future to see where things come from. So that namespace change, yes, is a pain. We had to do it. Now it's there, and in the future, I think we will look back and see it was actually a good thing. So, and it relates to Spring in a very apparent manner that you will discover when you start migrating in Spring is that you will see a lot of compilation errors and stuff, and I'll show that in a demo later, that Spring builds on a lot of Jakarta EE technologies. So that's how it's relevant to Spring. And it's mostly impacted now with these upgrades to Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3. Is the namespace change is probably the biggest hurdle there. So look at a couple of specifications. But before I do that, who here would say they are a Jakarta EE developer? Just a couple. And Spring developers. Okay, good. So remember this. Because if you look at persistence and Jakarta persistence, what is the implementation, or one of the implementations of Jakarta persistence? You probably use Hibernate in Spring, don't you? So when you do Spring data or some persistence, you're probably using Hibernate ORM as your persistent mechanism. So in fact, even though you raised your hand as a Spring developer here, you're using Jakarta technologies for your data. So you could have raised your hand on I'm a Jakarta developer as well. So next time I ask, you have to raise your hand. And what we did in Jakarta 10 was actually it was a small enhancement. In Jakarta 11, there will be lots of changes to Jakarta persistence. And you will benefit directly from it in Spring. And this is something you can benefit from today, is that we introduced UIDs as basic Java types in Jakarta persistence. And that means you can use it, in this case, as a primary key, but you use it in any field in your entity. And this will work just as well with Spring as with Jakarta EE, because it's Hibernate, and Hibernate is Jakarta persistence. Let's look at another one. This wasn't updated in 10. It's going to be updated in 11. And that's bean validation. And we are going to change the name here from bean validation to just validation, because it validates more than beans, but this is the name we had in 10. And how does this relate to Spring then? Well, you probably use some validation in your code. And if you do so, you're using Hibernate Validator. And Hibernate Validator is an implementation of Jakarta validation. So if you're using any validation in your code, you're using Hibernate Validator, hence you're using Jakarta EE, and you're a Jakarta EE developer next time, right? Let's look at one more, servlets. So Jakarta Servlet was updated to Servlet 6 in Jakarta 10. And if you remember, sometime in between, I think it was between some milestones or release candidates of Spring Boot 3, they upped the servlet from Servlet 5 to Servlet 6. Because Servlet 5 has the namespace change, but there were also some changes in Servlet 6. So they changed it and broke stuff backwards because they upgraded to Servlet 6 in some of those milestones. So if you're using Spring Boot 3 today, it's Servlet 6, and that's Jakarta E10 technologies. And servlet, that's you're using some kind of servlet or web container in Spring Boot as well. And if you do the default from the Spring initializer, you get a Tomcat embedded. And you can change it to Jetty or Undertow or OpenLiberty or whatever. And they're all servlet containers, hence Jakarta EE servlet. And you're using Jakarta technologies. That's enough with the slides for now. Let's do some demos. And the first demo is actually a slide demo, so I'm not entirely true there. But let's say you're creating a brand new Spring app. And I'm just using the Spring initializer, and I'm creating it. I'll use the Spring Boot, but I'll choose the war option. You can still do that. And I want to deploy it in my Tomcat I have running in my company. So I'm doing the old style stuff, right, where I create a web app and I deploy it to Tomcat. So if I have a Spring Boot 3 application and deploy it to Tomcat 9, will that work? I can tell you, it will actually deploy. There will be no errors. There will be nothing happening. And there won't be anything happening when you invoke the application either, because Tomcat won't discover it. Because if you're using Spring Boot 3, you're using Jakarta Servlet 6, and that's on the Jakarta namespace, and Tomcat 9 scans for javax servlets. So there will be no errors in the log, it will just not start. So you would have to upgrade to at least Tomcat 10. But I know this is not the way we do Spring applications today. We do it in Spring Boot, and it's more relevant how you upgrade an application from an old version to a newer. So what we're going to do is to take a Spring Boot 2 application, and I'm going to move it over to Spring Boot 3. And that should be fairly easy, right? It's just update the version number in the POM. So I have a Spring Boot application here. It's on 2.7.8. I know it's not the latest version of 2, but yeah, some probably use it. It's on Java 17, and it has a couple of dependencies, but really nothing going on. The application itself is a Spring Boot application. Just start it. And it has a REST endpoint where I can post to a user object in and create an account and store it in a database. And I can also query the users and get a list of them. So this is all that is going on. So let's run this one and just verify that it works. So I'll just build it so you see that I'm actually building it here. And then and this is an application I just generated from the Spring initializer. Then I'll start it. And let's invoke the get users. And you can see that there are no users because it's an in-memory database, so I haven't added anyone yet. So let's add Duke. So I'll add Duke. It says HTTP 200 and a nice red error message saying it's actually valid. So red means good in this case. And you can see now that I query, I see Duke in the database. So what happens if I don't have a valid email address? I just add Duke. Then I'll get a bad request. And it will not be in the database. You can also see in the log that it only created a user with ID 1, and the other one didn't get in. So there is some validation going on. So you have to have a valid email address in. So that's the business logic of this one. So let's upgrade this one to Spring Boot 3. And that should be easy. It should just be take 2.7.8 and pick 3.1, I think 3 and 4, is that something? And just reload it. So that should be it, right? I should be done. But I can see that, oh, I get some compilation errors here. So I have the @valid annotation on the user. That was the one that validated the email address. So here you already see, oh, it's some Jakarta stuff going on here. So let's fix this one. I'll do this manually. I'll show some other ways of doing it later. So I upgrade this one, and that should be it, right? So let's go and compile this. And now it fails. So it's still compiling, but my tests fails, and this is the generated test that I get from the Spring initializer. It just loads the context. So here's something it doesn't really work here, and that's because I probably have some more stuff going on than what I initially thought. So what I have done is I took the javax to Jakarta namespace in my application. I did that change when I upgraded it, so I should be fine. I could have used the IDE to do that, and I'll do that in a minute, because IntelliJ has this migrate packages Java EE to Jakarta EE, and I know as Spring developers you don't want to touch this, you get dirty, right? But if you use this refactoring in IntelliJ, it will actually migrate your Spring applications as well. So this does all the packages, and it omits the packages that are not affected. So there are some JavaX namespace classes in the JDK that like JavaX SQL and stuff that are not affected. So it will omit these and do it for you. You can also use Open Rewrite. And there are some Jakarta recipes there, and most of them will probably work for Spring applications as well. And there are some recipes or templates for Spring as well. And it's probably a good idea to look at what you have internally in your company and create some templates for your company as well. So Open Rewrite is a really good tool to do this stuff for you. So if you do it manually or with the tool, what you have to do is to update the Spring version in POM XML, then update the Jakarta EE versions if you have any. I didn't have any, so I just had what I got transited from Spring. And then fix the imports and compile and see if it runs. You may have some tests as well, but we don't do that stuff. So the reason why this failed is that my scenario wasn't as easy as I thought. I didn't have just a Spring app. I had some dependencies. And who has dependencies in their applications? Yeah. So in this case, I have this dependency called dukdep. So what I have to do is make sure that dependencies follows over to the Spring 3 version as well. And luckily here, in this case, I do have the source code for this dukdep. So I have dukdep here in my, I can look in the POM file. You can see here, I have the dukdep dependency, and dukdep is here. So I can have a look at it. And this is where the Spring Data repository is, and this is where I have the entity for storing in the database. So I do have all this independency, and this is all based on Spring 2 as well. So I have a dependency that is a Spring thingy with dependency. So this one should be fairly easy to upgrade as well. It's just to do the same steps as I did for my original artifact. So I'll do this one and take this one to 3.1.4 as well. And here I have some Jakarta dependencies, and these are the persistence API that I'm using in the entity, like let me see here. In the account class, I have this as add entity. I have the ID and these kind of generated value for the Jakarta persistence, which is used by Hibernate. So these also have to be updated to the Jakarta EE9 versions. Now, a little secret there, it works with 10 as well, so you can use the latest version because it pulls in that Hibernate that supports it. So I'll use the Jakarta EE10 versions of persistence, and also the validation, which I'm using here for the not blank and stuff. So I'll pull in this one, the version that is both in Jakarta EE9 and 10, and that is version 302. So. Oh, sorry. There you go. So I'll reload this one, and now you can see in my class area that I get a lot of compilation errors. So here I'll use the refactoring, where I migrate packages and classes, and here is where you have to get a little dirty and use the Java EE stuff. So I can do this. I can choose this Duke dependency stuff and run this refactoring, and I just do the refactoring, and it does the change in the entire source code for me. And OpenRewrite would do the same thing. So now I've done this change for this one. And what I also have to do is re-release this one, so I can have it as a dependency in my project. So in this case, I'll just use version 2. You could use a qualifier for Jakarta EE or whatever your internal policy for that is. So let's go to the dependency and Maven clean install. But before I do that, I'll just have a look in my Maven repository. I have the Duke dep here, and I only have a version 1.0. So what I'm going to do now is release this one. And you could do this in your company Nexus or something. Or if it's a public one, you can do it to Maven Central, and I have version 2.0 here as well. So now I can consume this from my application. So then I open the Duke boot application again, and here's where I have the Duke dependency, and I upgrade this to version 2, and then I'll recompile it. Now with the updated dependency, And now it compiles and the context loads. So now I've resolved this problem with the dependency. That's good. Let's run it as well. So I'm running it, and let's invoke some of these methods. The database is empty again because it's in memory. So let's add a Duke with a duke.com address. That's valid. You can see in the log it's added with ID 1. Let's also query the users. It's one user here. And let's try with the invalid email. And now you get the nice red message saying it's OK, and it should be 200. I created a user with ID 2. And if I look at the users, I now have an invalid email in my database. But it compiled and it loaded and everything. It should be fine, shouldn't it? Well, it turns out, in my case here, I had the Duke dependency and I had the source code so I could do the migration for it. So I could do the re-release of this dependency to a version 2.0. And what I did to achieve this was I updated the Spring version, I updated the Jakarta version, I fixed the imports, and I did it for all the dependencies I had the source code for. So it's kind of this you have to do. It's an iterative thing. But I had some external dependencies here. So if you look at the code, you may notice that I didn't only have the Duke dependency, I have a Duke lib as well. And the problem with the Duke lib is I need to transfer that one as well over to Spring Boot 3. And my issue here is that it was easier with the Duke dependency because I had the source code. But for Duke lib, I don't have the source code. And there may be many reasons why you don't have the source code. It could be that you created it back in the 90s and had it in Subversion and lost that server, or you don't know how to use Subversion anymore, or you bought something and that company is out of business. So it's some kind of library you have hanging around, you've always used it. It could be a transitive dependency for something that is not maintained. It could be any reason. I don't have the source code. How do I handle that? Well, luckily, there are some tools to help us. And we have a technology called transformation. And there are two open source tools that are equally good. It's the Eclipse Transformer, and it's the Apache Tomcat migration tools. And there are also some other stuff out there, but these two were created for Jakarta EE, but Spring developers can benefit from it, because after all, Spring developers are Jakarta EE developers as well. And the Eclipse Transformer is the one I'm going to use here. You can get it on the GitHub page for the transformer. It's Eclipse/transformer. There are several ways of using it. You can incorporate it in your POM file, so it will do it in your build as a Maven plugin. Or you can download it as a client, a jar file, and just run it in command line. It depends on how many stuff and how often are you going to do this transformation. So let's do this. I have downloaded it on my computer. I don't rely on the network. So I already have it here. Let's first look at what the potential problem can be. And you see, it is the Duke lib. And in my Duke REST application, so the problem I got in here was that the email wasn't valid. But I do validate the input here. So it should have validated, right? But it turns out that my user object comes from the Duke's lib. And that's the one I don't have the source for. So I'll probably have to investigate that one a little. So what I'm going to do is to just copy this Duke lib from Maven, my local Maven repository. You may have some corporate ones, but let's just look at it here. So in the Duke lib, you can see I have a version 1.0. So what I'm going to do is I'll just copy it to a temp folder here for now. And I'm copying it the dukelib 1.0 jar from my Maven repository down to my local computer here. So I have it here. And now I'm going to run the transformer on this jar. And I've downloaded the transformer jar. So I have downloaded it to my tools folder. It's the transformer CLI 050 jar. And the input here is this 1.0 of the dukelib that I just fetched. And I run the transformer on this one. It does a lot of stuff. And it creates an output dukelib jar. So let's look at how these are different from each other. So take these two and just compare them. And what you can see here in the dukelib 1.0, the original one, I have the javax validation constraints email. And in the transformed one, I have Jakarta validation constraint email. So it takes the bytecode and changes the namespace for me. There are lots of parameters, so we can kind of configure this to get it transformed in the way that fits your particular case, if you have some more internal stuff or anything. But the default will take javax to Jakarta. You can do any package renaming. But this will take the bytecode and just do it for you. So when I've done that, the next step I'm going to do is to make this available for me in my Duke application. And the way I do that is to install it into my local Maven repository. I could have used a company nexus or something. You should be maybe a little careful making it too public before you know what the license of this stuff is. If it's something you bought and it's a proprietary thing, then maybe you shouldn't put it on Maven Central. But it's more likely that it's something you have internally in your company. So I'll just do the Maven install file, and I'll install it in my local Maven repository. I use the output file from the transformation, and I use the same group ID, artifact ID, but I give it a version 2.0 here as well. In this case, you can also give it a classifier if you wanted, but I'll just do this now. So if I now look at the Maven repository, I now have a version 2.0 of the dukelib that I can consume from my Duke boot application. Let's upgrade this to 2.0 and recompile. And it compiles. No surprises there, and let's run it. And then do the same exercise with, first just check there are no users in the database. Then I'll post the valid email. There is a user in the database. You can see in the log it's been created. And let's do the Duke without it. And now I get the bad request. And now the validation hooks in because the namespace has been transformed. And that's because Spring Boot 3 uses Hibernate Validator that are using Jakarta persistence on the Jakarta namespace, so it won't discover the @valid if it's javax validator. And now it's not inserted in the database, and I only have the user I wanted. So what I did here was to transform the dependency I didn't have the source code for. So now the steps are, I update the Spring version in the POM file. I update any Jakarta versions I have in the POM file. I fix the imports. And I repeat this for all the dependencies I have the source for. If I have libraries I don't have the source for, and I don't have any way of obtaining it, do a transformation. This is kind of the last resort. You kind of want to have the real stuff, but in some cases this is the only way you can do it. You have to, like a deep transitive dependency tree that you don't have control over. There may be some additional migration steps as well. And that might be if you're using, for example, Hibernate caching, some caching strategy there. They may or may not, it depends on how you configure it, but you may have some property that is called javax caching strategy. This has to be renamed to Jakarta caching strategy. So all properties that are somewhere in your system prefixed with javax has to be renamed to Jakarta. That's part of the namespace change. We also have a lot of XML namespaces that were changed, but I don't think that's so relevant for a Spring Boot application. But if you have a Spring application where you're using a web XML file or something like that, you need to change that namespace as well to fit the new one for servlets. And you may also have some dynamic building of these properties, like if you concatenate javax with some other properties or whatever. All weird stuff happen in these kind of applications, and you may have some dynamic stuff if you do reflection or something that you're sure that you don't drag in some javax stuff. So what about 21 then? This is kind of just a little sugar coating on a demo. So all this is I'm using Java 17 here. That's what I got when I generated this one. You can choose 21 from the Spring initializer here. So if I wanted to, I'll actually do one more demo before I do that. I can upgrade to 21 first. But what I want to do is show you the UID stuff. So you can use this that you get from Jakarta EE 10. So if I wanted to use in my repository, rather than a primary key of long, I can use UID. So I'll change this. I'll go here, change this one to UID. I think auto actually works, but it's good to change it there. And then I have to switch the... of course, I could do some refactoring here, but it's not that much. So I'll change the garrisons header for the ID. So now I've updated my persistence object, and I'll just have to re-release this one as this was in the Duke dependencies. So I just have to install this in the main repository, then do the rebuild my application, and then run it. And if I now invoke the Duke users, you can see it now isn't an ID.1, it's a UID I get in the database. So and if I have Duke.nl or BE, since we're in Belgium, you get UIDs generated for your primary keys. So that's how easy it is to use the latest Jakarta EE stuff in your Spring application. So 21 then. If I wanted to use some this log statement with the ID created, let's use rather than concatenate strings, I'll use string templates. So what I have to do is just activate preview features in my application. So I'll just activate 21 preview, and for Spring, I also need to enable preview for the Surefire plugin since it loads this context and stuff. Of course, you could uncomment that test. That will solve it. But this is a way of getting the test to work. And if I wanted to use string templates here, I can use this. And you can see this weird... oh, I have to reload the POM. Let me see. There we go. So then I use this str, and then account created with, and then I can use the ID from this one, and I'm just logging in with login using string templates. So if I now recompile this one and run it, oh, what did I do wrong? Oh yeah, when you run with preview features, you have to have enable preview in this one. So enable preview. Because who uses preview features in production? Nobody. Should be more bold. So this is how you update your production scripts to use preview features. So if I now insert this one, you can see it now logs with the string templates as well. So yeah. So 21 works fine with this as well. Since you now are aware that there are lots of Jakarta EE stuff. If you do a migration from Spring Boot 2 to Spring Boot 3, there are other pains you have to go through as well, but they are Spring related. So, and they have amazing documentations on the Spring IO pages, and you can figure it out by reading blogs of people who have done it. That's kind of the Spring-related migration stuff. What I did was what touches Jakarta EE. So there are other issues as well, but that's more covered by the Spring faults, and it's good documentation for that there, and they have guides for all of this. But since you're now aware that Jakarta EE is actually fairly fundamental underneath all Spring, and if I ask the question who's Jakarta EE developer now, all of you would raise your hand. But so that's why it may serve you well to pay a little attention what we're doing in Jakarta EE, like the UIDs for persistence. That is something that you just get for free. When we do the other stuff in persistence 3.2, you will get that for free as well when the Spring framework updates to that version. And the uptake is usually fairly quickly, because Hibernate is an implementation of this. So as soon as it's there, they have it. So it may be good for you to pay a little attention what we're doing with Jakarta 11, because it will come to you right after. And we're planning on doing Jakarta 11 around summer next year. So it's only like 9 months out or so. And we're trying to establish a release cadence of roughly 6 to 9, maybe 12 months after the latest LTS of Java. So 21 came out a couple of weeks ago, so Jakarta EE will come out like summer next year. And when the next LTS comes, we will try to do the same thing. So we have this kind of predictable, steady cadence, and this is how we hope to be able to manage. We are adding a new specification in Jakarta 11. This is not that relevant for you, maybe, because Jakarta data is more or less the same thing as Spring data. But we're doing it in the Jakarta namespace with the Jakarta technologies. So if you want to explore Jakarta EE and you're a fan of Spring data, it would be easy to have the same development experience in Jakarta using Jakarta data. Jakarta NoSQL will not be a part of EE11 as a platform, but it's a standalone specification. So this is a standardization of integration with NoSQL databases, the same way as Jakarta Persistence standardizes relational databases. So Jakarta NoSQL may be, when it's available out there, maybe picked up by, I don't know if Hibernate is going to do it or somebody else, but if that's picked up and you want to do NoSQL integration, this will be a nice, easy way of doing that, in the same way as you integrate with Jakarta Persistence. We also started work, it's not come that far yet, but standardized gRPC within Jakarta EE. So this is kind of the same thing, standardized something, and there will be multiple implementations underneath. And if the Spring team figures out that's interesting, they may pull this in as well. Jakarta 11 will be compiled on Java SE21. And that is pretty aggressive for Jakarta EE. We're usually kind of a little bit behind of this. But we're doing less than or about a year after an LTS is when we release, and we want to use those features. So we will release Jakarta 11 on 21. And that means that when Spring Boot picks up the Jakarta 11 specifications, that will be the baseline for Spring as well, because otherwise it wouldn't compile. So to sum up, Jakarta E10 has a lot of updates. Some are more relevant than others for Spring. I picked 3 of them here today. There are others that may be interesting, but at least those 3 are fairly relevant. For 11, it's about the same amount, a little less, that are being updated for Jakarta 11, but you see among them we have persistence, validation, and servlet. They're all getting updates. So there are things there. Validation will add support for validating records. And the others will, persistence are adding a lot of convenient stuff if you're using that for, if you're not using Spring Data, but using more native Hibernate Jakarta persistent stuff. Persistence is adding a lot of goodies there that will make life easier for you. So I hope this talk has showed you how Jakarta EE is relevant to Spring, and mostly because Spring in a very large degree builds on top of Jakarta EE technologies. And one thing that makes that very obvious is the javax to Jakarta namespace switch. And that was all this talk was about. And the steps to upgrade your Spring applications would be somewhere in the lines of this. Up the Spring version in the POM XML, up the Jakarta EE versions, fix imports, repeat for dependencies, transform libraries if necessary, rename properties if you have any javax stuff, and verify the data and dynamic content if you have. And the source code for this demo is on my GitHub. It's called Jakarta EE Spring. And if you want to learn more about Jakarta EE, you can go to jakarta.ee. We have some blog aggregator where there are occasionally some Spring stuff as well. Anybody can get their blog published on Jakarta blogs. There are instructions there for how to get your blog on that page, and it aggregates blogs from the community. You can read my blog there or on my page. I write a weekly update on Jakarta EE. And as I said, the demo code for this application is in my GitHub on Jakarta EE Spring. If you're interested in learning about Jakarta EE, I have a course on LinkedIn Learning called Jakarta EE Overview. You can find it there and try it out. And with that, I thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll enjoy the rest of the conference, and we have a couple of minutes for questions. Yes?
Why did you transform the jar and not decompile it?
Okay, so the question is, why did I transform the jar and not decompile it? Yes, that would be an option as well. Decompile it, repackage it, and re-release it, of course. You could do that. Transform is a little bit easier, especially if you have lots of dependencies. It can do all of them for you. All right, thank you.